Well, there is no need to do that because nobody is watching. So there is no need to...
Francis, when we send the link, is that included?
What?
When we send the link, is that included?
Yes, yes, yes.
John, did you hear that? It's included.
Yes. It depends. I have recorded it. Let him work. Any questions in the meantime?
Okay, so my question's about meditation.
Speak closer to the
My
mic.
question's about during the meditation.
Make sure you hear yourself through the speakers.
Okay, during meditation, I notice you said there's no goal. And so then what I notice is, even in really the deep meditation, there's this subtle seeing of the efforter, the wanter. It's just really subtle. But I notice there's some looking for a quality, some kind.
Looking for?
Looking for some kind of quality of, just looking for something, the seeker, the wanter. And so I notice that there's a tendency to go focus on that wanter, the person, the efforter. And, and then there'll be a lot of description with that, the, sense of lack, things like that. So I guess my question is, I'm looking for some kind of guidance about what at that point, because it feels, I guess there's more identification instead of just it being a sensation. It's more of a story. And I just didn't know, maybe is that what you mean by surrender the position to the space? Maybe that's what needs to happen there. I just noticed.
Yes, that's more the yoga part. In the yoga, we use tricks, if you will. In meditation, there is no trick, there is no goal. And if there is a goal, it's an opportunity to see that we are always pursuing a goal. And the reason why we are pursuing a goal is because we feel it's not good right now.
Yeah, that's the feeling. There's just...
So it's due to a large extent to a wrong idea we have about meditation. Usually, most people see meditation as a means towards an end, so that through meditation we are going to reach a pleasurable state. That may happen, that may well be the case, but not necessarily. So we have to be able to detect when we are meditating and when we are not meditating. And we are meditating whenever we we distance ourselves from the belief and the feeling to be a separate entity. It has nothing to do with a pleasurable state. You see, that has to be understood. Over time, yes, over time, we'll be at peace, because that which poops the party, so to speak, is our desire to change the situation. So don't expect the meditation to be pleasant. A pleasant state doesn't mean meditation, and perfect meditation doesn't mean a pleasant state. It means a correct state, and a correct state, another way to explain it, to describe it, is to be not knowing regarding what we are, to be not knowing regarding the nature of consciousness. It's not to be in not knowing regarding everything. You know, well, I don't know whether I am in the United States or in France. I don't, you know, that's, it's called Alzheimer's. It's a different thing. But the not knowing here applies to only one thing, not knowing what I am. That's a perfect situation. And that's what we have to check in the meditation. That's the only activity, you know, to go back to meditation. We move out of meditation the moment we believe to be a man, a woman, a human body, a limited entity. We go back to meditation when it becomes clear to us that we don't know that.
So then in that moment when there's just the clarity, but then the efforter is noticed or seen, it seems like there's only thing I can do with that is just to see it. I don't know.
Meditation acts a lot through thinking, understanding, thinking/understanding, and feeling/understanding. But regarding, you know, this expectation of a pleasurable state, it's like someone, during meditation, it's like someone undergoing, I don't know, hip surgery because they are in a lot of pain, and expecting that the surgery or the recovery period is going to be extremely pleasant. You see what I mean? I mean, perhaps it is, I don't know, but I have some doubts.
Okay, thanks.
Francis, I've enjoyed having some exchanges with you about the evidence there is for personal consciousness versus universal consciousness. And I thought that what might help a skeptical person like me is to ask you about, as you were learning about this new understanding, were there rational arguments that were helpful or that were encouraging you not to be open and not to be as skeptical as I assume you probably were, coming from an atheist family and a scientific background? Were there rational arguments that came along with other things that helped you to be open to the possibility of universal consciousness?
Yes. But the rational arguments are used for the deconstruction of the old belief systems, to go beyond that. My teacher used to say, well, it's a kind of poetry. It's only when poetic means creative, in Greek. It's a kind of poetry. So I started with the books of Krishnamurti, and Krishnamurti was not very rational. But there was some, between the lines, so to speak, there was a perfume, and that's what attracted me. Later on, I discovered Zen through the Japanese version, which is not at all rational because they kind of kill the thoughts. And then I discovered Vedanta. And then Vedanta, yes, is very, very rational, very philosophical. And then I met my teacher, who was rational and also poetic in his teaching, artistic, poetic. So there are the two elements, one that takes you to the threshold by opening you to the possibility. And then something is said or something happens, and then they are taken beyond the threshold. So that's the poetic element. The rational approach is the one for those who are inclined to follow this path, is the one which confers the greatest stability, because you are immediately on solid ground. You have investigated, you have gone through all the arguments again and again and again, and it takes you to this place of not knowing. And then you are open to allow for this not knowing to unfold, which is meditation. So yes, there is a place for rational. You can see that there are other teachers that are certainly less rational than Francis. I think it's due in part to my scientific background, and that I like to address all the possibility, put a dot on all the I's and to cross all the T's. That's what mathematicians do. If they fail to cross one T, it's not good. So some teachers, they are kind of a little awkward in their presentation. They lack consistency. It doesn't mean they don't have the poetic power to, that comes from the experience. Some teachers may even have the wrong interpretation. I mean, they can make a wrong interpretation. They may make the wrong interpretation. That a more rational person will, the flows of which will be obvious to a more rational person. It doesn't matter, the experience, they don't speak from experience, it doesn't matter, it doesn't mind that they are in ignorance. It's just that their mind doesn't. Some teachers have the experience first, and then 10 years later, like Ramana Maharshi, finally they get the right model, which is Advaita, about what their experience is.
Francis, this is very helpful to me. To me, being a skeptical person, I'm hesitant to put aside what seems to be the stronger, obvious evidence. And so what I think you're saying is that rationality is what you use to debunk what you think is strong evidence.
Exactly, absolutely.
Strong evidence that rules out the possibility of consciousness being universal, in other words, so that becomes a live option.
Strong evidence, or in fact, strong evidence that there is no evidence.
Right, right.
I would even say more than strong evidence. Absolute evidence, absolute, not strong, absolute evidence that there is no evidence whatsoever in support of consciousness defined as the reality that is hearing these words, defined as such, not in terms of content, but in terms of the reality of hearing, of perceiving, that there is not a shred of evidence in support of the theory of a limited consciousness.
And well, you say that, and that always puts me off because you say not a shred. But I think what I really interpret that as being not any shred of convincing evidence. There's all sorts of experiential evidence.
Well, but
I don't want to argue.
You know what the other term is for a non-convincing evidence is bogus evidence. Either evidence is convincing or it is bogus.
That's true. And
there is no such a thing as a non-convincing evidence. If it is evident, it's evident. But the beauty is that we can be absolutely convinced, absolutely, without the slightest possibility of a doubt, that all the evidence that there is no evidence at all that consciousness is separate. And remember that I defined consciousness as a reality that perceives, or as a reality of our human nature, as a reality of our true self, if you will, and try to figure out, try to reflect on what would it mean for a reality to be limited. What would be a limited reality?
Well, I can speculate about that.
Remember that reality is that which cannot not exist.
And I can discuss that with you as well. But I was wondering, how long did it take you as a skeptical person to debunk what to most people is pretty convincing experiential evidence that we're separate? And that's why people are not necessarily very happy, but that they don't see a rational way out of being separate, and eventually come to retreats and other things and look for another option, which I think is what you are proposing, which is a good thing. But well, how long it took you to get to that point?
It's not like it is only rational. As I said, rationality is that which takes you to the threshold. And poetry, or something else, grace, is that which takes you beyond the threshold. So, in my reading of Krishnamurti, there was already an element of grace. In other words, as I said, he was not very rational by my standards. By his standards, I guess he was, but not by mine. But there was something that was even more powerful than the rationality. And this experience, I would call it the perfume. My teachers call it the perfume. And it is that which gives you the strength and that kind of redirect the energies towards the self, the energies that we were dispersed in seeking of events and of objects get redirected towards the experience of our true nature, because we have had some inklings of it.
Would you say...
For instance, I wanted to meet a teacher, but I was very aware that I had been a follower of Krishnamurti for 2 years, and also Zen and Advaita. But I wouldn't say that I wanted to meet a teacher to help me build a completely rational theory of consciousness. No, I wanted to meet a teacher too. First, because I wanted to see how he lived in everyday life, which is very important. Can someone be happy and at peace in everyday life, and how does it manifest, How does freedom in a being manifest? And also the perfume. You see, also the experience of that which cannot be explained. And ultimately, that was perhaps more important than the rest. The rationality is only a tool. It's not a tool for everybody. And the goal, and this tool has fulfilled its mission the moment it has taken us to this not knowing. What we have to recognize, which is important, Atmananda Krishna Menon was insisting on that, and rightfully so, is that phenomenal experience, which is the experience we have through human minds, phenomenal experience is not all there is to human experience. There is noumenal experience. There is this knowledge through which consciousness knows of its own existence. And how could consciousness know of its existence if not through the experience of itself? So there is experience of phenomena, and there is experience of consciousness. So this kind of experience is usually not accepted, not validated, not recognized in most cultures. And that's the point, because from that experience we can derive some certainties.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
You see, if you think in your own case, you came back, although you were not satisfied by the rational arguments, so there must have been something else that took you back here, you see?
So, I have a question about your answer to how to decipher between intuition and mind.
How to decide what?
How to distinguish between intuition and mind. And
Did I speak about intuition?
Your answer, if I remember correctly.
Right now?
No.
A long time ago?
Yeah, last
Okay.
retreat here. Your answer was that it's the difference between personal and impersonal, basically, if I was to...
It applies to the intuition of our true nature. There are many forms of intuitions. The highest form is the intuition of our true nature. There are other forms of intuition that are purely mind. But yes, the highest form, yes. It's this deep sense that there is only one reality. That's the deepest intuition.
I think that's what I'm kind of conflicted with, because I can't, it's hard for me to distinguish between the two, because it's this like, I don't know, it's like this all.
You mean between the two what?
Between personal and impersonal? But I guess you answered my question.
No,
before I got there.
You can have an intuition which is impersonal, which doesn't come from ignorance, but which is phenomenal. For instance, you may have the intuition that something will happen, and then it happens. So, this intuition didn't necessarily come from the belief to be a separate entity. You see? But, so in that sense, it's impersonal. But it's impersonal, but phenomenal, because it relates to an event. The highest form of intuition is, of course, impersonal, but it is the intuition of our true nature. The intuition that refers to consciousness, reality. And it is really the only intuition we speak about here. But we have often good intuition. You meet a person, you start a new relationship. That's the example I often use. But in the first moment, you have this intuition, there is something which is a little fishy. But then with your mind, you persuade yourself that he or she has all the required qualities, that you can check all the cases, all the boxes. And then you go into it, and then 3 months later, it's a catastrophe. So this intuition was impersonal, it was true. There was nothing with the person. The mistake came after, the person came after when you tried to rationalize it to go against this first intuition. But it's not the intuition, the highest form, it's not the intuition that takes us here.
I have another question, if I may. I'm not able to formulate it right now. I'll ask later. Thank you.
Francis, I heard on a SANS conference on YouTube Something you felt humanity was doomed? Or is that, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly or not, but
I mean, the Earth is doomed. At some point, something is going to happen. The sun is doomed. At some point, the energy from the sun is going to diminish, and then, I don't know, there will be a supernova or something like that, a big explosion. I don't know what is going to happen to the Earth in this event, or to the entire solar system. So yes, the Earth is doomed, and everybody on it.
There have been some teachers that, I have an opinion because of people's morality and other, inhumanity toward man and everything, that's going to cause the planet to destruct. So you're not talking about that at all then?
You say that's because there is a lack of morality, there is going to be I think I don't speak about that. My feeling is that we are in decadence, yes, but who knows? I mean, that relates to our civilizations. I mean, our civilization has become a little global, in fact. And very materialistic, very egocentric. So civilizations come and go. But the end of the solar system, it's a much longer term event. But if you think about it, you look at the nocturnal sky, and you see that even the solar system around the sun, look at how many stars you have. You look through a telescope, you take a small portion of sky, you look at it, again you have the same quantity of stars beyond that. The sun is one of these zillions of stars. So a little bit of humility here is. At the same time, it's really extraordinary. I mean, the evolution of life, on this earth lost in the infinite space, that we are able to communicate, to understand, to. The problem is ignorance. That's. But it's meant to be that way. There's nothing to. You don't need to have any regrets. That's the way the game is being played. The beauty is that nevertheless we are free. That for those who are devoted to this inner peace, the inner peace finds them no matter where they are, no matter. And they can live in a peaceful world of their own, which is designed for them.
Hi. I think this is more of a comment, but maybe it will elicit some thoughts from you, but I guess the times that I've come here, I'm always struck by how much clarity I get and how much curiosity comes up about consciousness. And then, I'm sure, well, in my experience, a lot of people have experienced this where they go back home and, for me, the curiosity dissipates, the clarity dissipates, and it seems to just kind of be the way in my experience. But I guess I'm curious what your experience has been with when you were, first going to retreats and then leaving, and how you found your way through that.
It's over time. It happens over time. First, when I would leave my teacher, I would kind of fall back into the old patterns. For instance, he was teaching me his yoga, but I didn't understand the nature of the yoga. I was doing Hatha Yoga for 2 years, because I had done Hatha Yoga before, so it was more of a disadvantage than an advantage. And then when I would leave him, the perfume seemed to evaporate over a period of a few days. Then I discovered that the perfume would come back when I was hanging out with truth lovers, for instance. But also it would come back when I would read about the truth or when I would meditate. So gradually or incrementally, it became more stable. It's not something that happens, The idea, the image according to which you are absolutely miserable like that, and then there is this event, and all of a sudden you are perfectly happy. In most cases, that's not the way it works. It's more, there might be an earth-shattering event, but then the old habits tend to come back. But over time, and somehow, so the two things that, the two pillars I was relying upon were, on the one hand, this rational deconstruction, and the perfume I was experiencing in the presence of my teacher, and that later on I was experiencing on my own. It was interesting to see how events in my life that had the same event happen 10 years before, I would have suffered a lot due to my attachment. And the same events would happen, and it was not much of a problem. So that's also interesting to notice. So life offers us a lot of challenges over the years, and these challenges are the opportunities to conduct the experiments I was alluding to. And the outcome of those experiments builds up the trust. When you come to a place like here, after a few days, you notice that there is a quality, the perfume, that we cannot really put the finger on. You see, but once we have experienced the perfume, it never leaves us somehow. We know we have experienced it. In other words, it's happiness without cause. It never leaves us, it remains always available to us. If we kick it out, it remains just behind the door, so to speak. If we open the door, it comes back. So in my case, after a few years, perhaps after 2 years, I had completely explored with my teacher the intellectual part of it, the logical or rational part. A few more years for the body aspect. And then my teacher said, well, once you have done that, now it's about life. It's about the art of living, how to apply that to life. So let's say that was 5 years. I was with my teacher for an association that lasted for 22 years. So the other remaining 17 years, we were just friends. You know, I enjoy being with him. I enjoy attending his events. But I describe a personal experience, and one shouldn't conclude from that your journey is going to be similar. You see? We are all different. As I often said, what is important at some point is to recognize, to realize that our life is convergent towards happiness. That's a great milestone on the journey. The first milestone is the interest. The second milestone is when this interest becomes the highest priority in our life. And the third milestone is when we realize that we are converging towards happiness, comparing our current situation to where we were 5 years earlier. And at some point we realize that we have left misery behind on this journey. It doesn't mean the journey is over, but we are now walking on the sunny side of the street and enjoying the walk.
Thank you. I wonder whether they have a bug over there